Listen-only mode.
I'm sorry for the delay, but welcome to our Essential Substance Abuse Skills webinar series. I'm Kate Trans, and I will be administering today's webinar. Today, Ed Haycraft will be speaking on counseling families, partners, and significant others. This training series is brought to you by the National American Indian and Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center, or ATTC. The National American Indian and Alaska Native ATTC is one of 4 national focus centers which serves the ATTC network. The ATTC network is a nationwide network made up of 10 regional centers, 4 national focus centers, and a network coordinating office. The map on this slide shows the states served by each of the regional ATTCs. To learn more about our center, the network, or your regional center, please visit our website. This series is designed to be a broad overview to assist in preparing for written alcohol and drug certification examinations, to enhance existing knowledge, and to improve overall competence and treatment outcomes. Please be aware that this series is not meant to stand alone, and previous education and training is necessary in order to pass alcohol and drug certification exams. We recommend that if you are preparing for an exam, that you seek additional preparatory help and let this course be one of the many tools you use to prepare. Our next webinar in this series is scheduled for Wednesday, December 18, where Robert Foley will present Client, Family, and Community Education. In addition to this webinar series, we offer another series titled the American Indian and Alaska Native Behavioral Health Webinar Series, which presents on current topics of interest in the behavioral health field. The next session in this series will be held on December 2nd from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time, where Becky Tussing will be presenting on techniques used in combating prescription drug abuse from the Keweenaw Bay Indian community. For more information on this webinar series, you can contact me using the email address or phone number provided on this slide. Our center is a NADAC certified educational provider, and we'd be happy to provide you with CEUs. The cost is $10 to do so. The CEU request form, along with a copy of the PowerPoint, will be sent to you within 24 hours of today's session. If you don't receive the email with handouts within 2 business days, please let us know. In addition to the PowerPoint handout and CEU request form, a link to our GIPRA evaluation will be included in the email you receive following today's webinar. We invite you to participate in this brief online customer survey. This survey asks about your satisfaction with the event and will take less than 10 minutes to complete. GIPRA stands for the Government Performance and Results Act, and SAMHSA asks us to evaluate our events in order to comply with this act and provide improved performance assessment and accountability. SAMHSA uses information collected by these surveys to determine how many people have attended our events, your satisfaction with our events, and how useful our events are to you. We hope you will assist us in gathering information about our services by participating in our evaluation. Before we start today's session, I'd like to give you a quick overview of the GoToWebinar system. To hide or expand your toolbar at any time, you can click on the red arrow at the top right side of your window. To expand your screen, click on the middle button in the top right-hand corner. You will be muted for the duration of this webinar. Please use the question chat box to share your questions and comments. Your questions will only be visible to me, the webinar moderator. I will pass your questions along to the presenter at appropriate points in the presentation. We would also like you to be aware that this webinar records participant attention time. If you minimize the webinar or are working in another window, the system will record your participation as inactive, which may be reflected in the number of CEUs received. Today's speaker is Ed Haycraft. Mr. Haycraft is currently employed by the Department of Veteran Affairs as a clinical social worker and is an adjunct faculty member in the School of Social Work at the University of Iowa, where he teaches on the topic of chemical dependency to undergraduate and graduate students. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Haycraft.
Hello, my name is Ed Haycraft. I'd like to welcome everybody here today. I'd like to thank the ATTC, Aunt Helena, and the staff here for allowing me to present on this topic. And without any further hesitation, I'll go ahead and get started on this. So as far as goals and objectives, first of all, understanding the characteristics and dynamics of families, couples, and significant others affected by substance use and substance use disorders. Be familiar with the appropriately used models of diagnosis and intervention for families, couples, and significant others, including extended, kinship, or tribal family structures. Assist families, couples, and significant others to understand the interaction between family systems and substance use behaviors. And 4, assist families, couples, and significant others to adopt strategies and behaviors that sustain recovery and maintain healthy relationships. So why do we use family therapy? So what's the important things here? So obviously, looking at family strengths. So utilizing family strengths, because there's always family strengths and involved within the family. It's just finding out what those strengths are, and also obviously to reduce the impact of chemical dependency on the family. Some key concepts. The family, the whole system is more than the sum of its parts. So it's kind of a gestalt thing just by concept. Parts of the system are interconnected. Certain rules determine the function of a family system. So there's rules both externally and internally within the family and outside of the family that have influence upon the family system. And systems are dynamic, carefully balancing continually against change. So there always seems to be some resistance to change, some static behavior within family systems. And many times what we look at when addressing these things are through genograms or systems maps, which we'll talk a little bit about in some of the models that we're going to look at here today. Before really going into a lot of the models, I'd like to reiterate that this is really just a brief overview, and there are people that spend many years developing and working on these models and in these modalities, and it's important to understand that, but at the same time, I think it's very important to have just an overview knowledge, because it's not a one-size-fits-all type of a world out there when working with patients, clients, and family structures. So it's really good to have an understanding so that you can maybe look at some of these models and gain some more insight or education on these. So foundations. Individual therapy can provide the concentrated focus to help people become more fully themselves, whereas family therapy believes the dominant forces in our lives are located externally inside the family system itself. Family roles change, so people's behavior within the intra-family systems are going to change, and families adapt, and not always the way that they might be expected to adapt. So when there's a shift that occurs within a family system, we may think it's going to go in a certain direction as a therapist, and even the other family members may feel that it's going to go in a certain direction, but it's not always what happens. Other issues are brought to light, and change can mean something different for different members of the family. First, we're going to look at the Bowenian perspective. Bowen, I can't even talk today. Murray Bowen was born in 1913 as the oldest of 5 children and grew up in a small town of Waverly, Tennessee, where his father was the mayor for some time. Bowen got his BS in 1934 at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. He received his MD in 1937 at the Medical School of the University of Tennessee Medical Schools in Memphis. After that, he had internships at the Bellevue Hospital in New York City in 1938 and had at Grasslands Hospital in Valhalla, New York from 1939 to 1941. From 1941 to 1946, he had his military training followed by 5 years of active duty with the Army in the United States and Europe. During the war, his interest changed from surgery to psychology and psychiatry. While observing the soldiers, he decided that mental illness was a more pressing and worthwhile goal. After his military service, he had been accepted for fellowship in surgery at Mayo Clinic, but in 1946, he started at the Menninger Foundation in Topeka, Kansas as a fellow in psychiatry and personal psychoanalysis. Here again, I'm having problems talking today. Psychoanalysis. The psychiatric training and experience lasted here until 1954. Some of the things about Bowenian theory that are extremely important are to look at the way that he talks about the differentiation of self. Most of family therapy's pioneers were pragmatists, more concentrated and were concerned with action than insight, more interested in technique than theory. Bowen was the exception. He was always more committed to systems theory as a way of thinking than a set of interventions specifically. According to Bowen, we have less autonomy in our emotional lives than we assume. Most of us are more dependent and reactive to one another than we like to think that we are. Bowen's systems theory describes how the family, as a multi-generational network of relationships, shapes the interplay of individuality and togetherness using 6 different interlocking concepts. First, the differentiation of self, triangles, nuclear family, emotional process, family projection process, a multi-generational transmission process, and finally sibling position. The differentiation of self is really his cornerstone and the rock of Bowenian therapy. Roughly analogous to ego strength differentiation is the capacity to think and reflect, to not respond automatically to emotional pressures, internal or external. It is the ability to be flexible and act wisely even in the face of anxiety. So in other words, undifferentiated people are easily moved to emotionality, so they react more if they're undifferentiated. Hence, if they're differentiated, they seem to be more grounded and more focused. Some of the other concepts that we look at are the emotional triangles that Bowen talks about. So as he says, triangulation lets off steam but freezes conflict in place. So when you think about it, there's this triangle in relationships. So you have, let's say for example, a mother and a father and a child that's trying to possibly gain their way or to maybe persuade a situation. So many times they will triangulate. They will go off of the one parent to the other parent. It's really interesting when you stand back and you look at that within your own situations as well. The sibling position, Bowen agreed with the notion that children develop personality characteristics based on their position in the family. So many variables are involved. That the prediction is complex, but knowledge of general characteristics plus specific knowledge of a particular family is helpful in predicting what part of a child or what part a child will play in the family emotional process. So where that child is positioned and where they've learned to be positioned. Bowen's treatment modalities discourage therapists from trying to fix relationships and instead encourage them to remain neutral while exploring the emotional process in conflictual relationships with process questions. Bowen therapists rarely give advice. They just keep asking questions. Some of the things that they look at are doing a genogram, the therapy triangle. If the therapist can remain free of the emotional reactivity families bring to therapy, clients are better able to reduce their own emotionality and begin to think more clearly about their problem. Process questions, relationship experiments, coaching, the I position. Bowen was the one who was really given credit for putting the I statement in therapy. And along with the multi-generational transmission process. Just to kind of recap, a few things that are very important about a Bowenian therapy are detriangulation, differentiation of self, family life cycle, multi-generational transmission process, and triangulation. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about experiential perspective. This is given to Carl Whitaker and Virginia Satir. Carl Whitaker's creative and spontaneous thinking formed the basis of a bold and a new perspective and approach to family therapy. He believed that the active and forceful personality involvement and caring of the therapist was the best way to bring about change in families and promoted flexibility among family members. He relied on his own personality and wisdom rather than any fixed techniques to stir things up in families and to help family members open up and be more fully themselves. Virginia Satir is one of the key figures in the development of family therapy. She believed that a healthy family life involved an open and reciprocal sharing of affection, feelings, and love. Satir made enormous contributions to family therapy in her clinical practice and training. She began treating families in 1951 and established a training program for psychiatric residents at the Illinois State Psychiatric Institute in 1955. The basis of the model, experiential family therapy, is founded on the premise that the cause and effect of a family problem is emotional suppression. Although children must learn that they can't always do whatever they feel like doing, many parents have an unfortunate tendency to confuse the instrumental and expressive functions of that emotion. They try to regulate their children's actions by controlling their feelings. As a result, children learn to blunt their emotional experience to avoid making waves or making problems within the family. Although this process is more or less universal, dysfunctional families tend to be less tolerant of the emotional and emotion side of the individual, that signal individuality that is most problematic within the family. As a result, children in such families often grow up estranged from themselves and their feelings. Only the residues of repressed affect, boredom, apathy, and anxiety permeate. As a statement from Virginia Satir in 1972 states, we attempt to make 3 changes in the family system. First, each member of the family should be able to report congruity, completely and honestly on where or what he or she sees, hears, feels, or thinks about themselves and the others within the family unit. Second, each person should be addressed and related to in terms of his or her uniqueness so that the decisions are made in terms of exploitation and negotiation rather than in terms, or excuse me, exploration and negotiation rather than in terms of power. Third, differentness must be openly acknowledged and used for growth. So basically acknowledging that there are different behaviors, thoughts, and feelings within the family and talking about those openly. Treatment is therefore aimed at reducing defensiveness within and between family members, and the counsel acts as an agent or provocateur for intense emotional awareness and expression. Experiential therapy works from the inside out, strengthening families by encouraging individual self-expression, reversing the usual direction of effect in family therapy. Experiential family therapy is also distinguished by a commitment to emotional well-being as opposed to problem solving only. Personal integrity and self-fulfillment are seen as innate human capacities that will emerge spontaneously once defensiveness within the family unit is overcome. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about structural family therapy, which is given to Salvador Minuchin as far as being the one who came up with the foremost principles of this therapy. Some of the things that Minuchin looks at is the way that families are put together, the way that they work with each other, and the way that those boundaries are put together or are related to one another. Some of the techniques include reframing, punctuation, unbalancing, restructuring, enactment, working with spontaneous interaction, intensity, shaping, competency. For example, major upheavals that require structural adjustment occur when, like, divorced parents remarry. Such blended families either readjust their boundaries or soon experience transitional conflicts. He's big into drawing this out. So there's a system for drawing this out. There's a system that shows these significant boundaries, and also the open and closed boundaries. Structural family therapy utilizes not only a unique systems terminology, but also means of depicting key family perimeters through these diagrams. Minuchin's focus is on the structure of the family, including its various substructures in this regard. He is a follower of systems and communications theories, since his structures are defined by transactions among interrelated systems within the family. Minuchin subscribes to the systems notion of wholeness, and both of which are critical to his notion of change. Some of the therapeutic techniques that Minuchin uses is joining and accommodating, working with interaction, mapping structural patterns. So that's why I talk about the whole structural mapping process. Which is very unique to his concepts. Making boundaries, unbalancing, and challenging unproductive assumptions. The most important tenet of this approach is that every family has a structure, and this structure is revealed only when the family is in action. According to this view, therapists who fail to consider the entire family structure and intervene only with one subsystem are unlikely to affect lasting change. Which basically is saying, if you go in and you look at just like and treat the individual and don't look at the other family involvement that's going on there, it's going to be difficult for that person to go back into that family structure and have a significant period of change. We find this a lot working with people that are chemically dependent. If you look at the person that comes in and they have a substance use disorder, and maybe there's things going on in the household, whether they're communication issues or maybe there's substance use going on in the household. Like with adolescents, if you have an adolescent that comes in and there's substance use going on in the household, how does that system work together within that family? So what he's looking at is that if you just treat that individual as the patient, return them back to that system, you're going to have a very difficult time trying to have an effective long-term change. So looking at the family members and looking at the way that they associate with each other, whether there are really rigid alignments or whether they're more diffuse, is very important to see how these systems interact with each other and the way that they're able to adapt when you're treating the family and how those might change as the process. Excuse me. Some of the concepts that we look at within this therapeutic model are accommodation, boundary, coalition, cross-generational coalition, empathy, enactment, enmeshment, family structure, hierarchical structure, intensity, joining, reframing, shaping competence, and subsystems. Moving along to the strategic perspective, Erik Erikson broadened the development perspective beyond early childhood, establishing balance between ourselves and our social world, a biosocial approach. Crisis is equivalent to a turning point in people's lives. Ego developing strength and ways to deal with life tasks and personality stages. This model is also related to Gregory Batson, who was an English anthropologist, social scientist, linguist, visual anthropologist, and cyberneticist. His work also intersected with many other fields, and he had a natural ability to recognize patterns just generally within the universe. In the 1940s, he helped extend systems theory and cybernetics to the social and behavioral scientists and spent the last decade of his life developing meta-science of epistemology to bring together the various early forms of systems theory developing in various fields of science. So this is a very in-depth type of a therapy that has very specific application and specific techniques related to it. Strategic therapy grew out of the communications therapy developed in Batson's schizophrenia project, which evolved into three distinct models: MRI's brief therapy model, Haley and Medina's strategic therapy, and the Myelin system model, with the birthplace of all three was the Mental Research Institute, or MRI. Many of the techniques that have been developed have been referred to as paradoxical techniques, which came out of Erikson's application of hypnotic principles to turn resistance to advantage. The basics of the model: in Pragmatics of Human Communication, Watzlawick, Bevan, and Jackson sought to develop a calculus of human communication, which they stated in a series of axioms. The first of these axioms is that people are always communicating. There's always some type of communication going on. Because all behavior is communicative, and because one cannot behave, it follows that one cannot not communicate. So it goes along with the assertions that we're always trying to communicate at some level. There's always some type of communication that's taking place, and it just kind of looks at all behaviors as being some form of that communication. The second axiom is that all messages have report and command functions. The report or content of a message conveys information, whereas the command is a statement about the relationship. For example, the message, "Mommy, Sandy hit me," conveys information but also implies a command, do something about it, for example. Many of the, or just some of the key concepts that I'd like to take and talk about in this therapy are the paradox and the paradoxical injunction. The paradoxical injunction is a technique that's used in a very strategic manner at an appropriate time where the therapist directs family members to continue their behavior of issue, so or their symptomatic behavior. If they conform, they admit control and expose secondary gain. If they rebel, they give up their symptoms. So if it's kind of used as a way of like overshooting the issue itself by the therapist, and it allows the therapist then to see how the individual is going to respond and where they're going to go with that if it's being promoted. Also, they look at feedback loops. There's positive and negative feedback loops, actually a series of concepts, very in-depth concepts that go along with strategic perspective. So feedback loops, the return of a portion of the output of a system, especially when used to maintain the output when predetermined limits, so negative feedback, or to signal a need to modify the system, which will be positive feedback. Cognitive behavioral perspectives. A lot of us are very familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy and the different perspectives used in CBT. The counselor is seen more as the teacher or the individual that is being looked to for assistance. And family symptoms are treated as learned responses, involuntarily acquired and reinforced. So it really looks at just basic cognitive therapy and the fact that we learn how to respond to given stimuli, that we're presented with situations, whether it be in society as general or within the family, that we're going to respond to, and that many of those responses are learned within the family unit through the socialization process within early childhood or even infancy. Behavioral therapists have been applying their technique to family problems for over 30, 40 years, and they have done so for the most part within a linear framework of reference. Family systems are treated as learned responses and learned processes, involuntarily acquired and reinforced. Treatment is generally time-limited and symptom-focused. The behavioral approach to families is based on social learning theory. The behavioralists focus on modifying the consequences of the problem. Behavior accounts for the strengths and weaknesses for this approach. By concentrating on presenting problems, behavioralists have been able to develop an impressive array of effective techniques. Behavioralists rarely treat whole families. Instead, they see only those subsystems that are considered to be central to the target behavior. Unfortunately, one of the failures, or even to consider the entire family in treatment, may be not as profitable in the long run. So if you're only treating a subsystem, like let's say a child or a parent or one person in a relationship, it again comes back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, as far as just looking at that subsystem and treating the subsystem and then returning that back into the system as a whole and seeing what happens. Behavioral family therapy offers impressive techniques for treating problems with children and troubled marriages. Furthermore, its weaknesses can be corrected by broadening the focus or conceptualization of the scope of treatment to include families as systems, so then bringing the whole family on board. Perhaps the greatest strength of behavioral family therapy is its insistence on observing what happens and then measuring change. So that's one of the things too that you really look at within this type of a process is trying change and looking to see what happens, and then going back and identifying if there's a need for more change at some point. Behaviorists have developed a wealth of reliable assessment methods and applied them to evaluation, treatment planning, and the monitoring process of outcome. Some of the concepts that we look at within this therapeutic model are behavior exchange theory, classical conditioning, cognitive behavioral therapy, contingency contracting, contingency management, modeling, operant conditioning, token economy, theory of social change, just to name several. So moving on to some of the more current perspectives, we look at the solution-focused perspective, and I always look at this, and I always say just a little caveat about motivational interviewing when I talk about this, because there's so many things that are relatable from MI to solution-focused brief therapy, and that some of those being just the positive regard for the client. It's very client-centered. It's very brief, and it's looking at solutions that the individual can self-identify. So often referred to simply as just solution-focused therapy or brief therapy. It's a type of talk therapy that is based upon social constructionist psychology. It focuses on what clients want to achieve through therapy rather than on problems specific that made them seek help. The way that I always look at it, it's not always necessarily where you got the flat tire or you picked up the nail. It's more or less fixing the tire and getting on down the road. Hence, the approach does not focus on the past, but instead focuses on the present and the future. The therapist uses respectful curiosity to invite the client to participate within the process themselves. The therapist and the client start attending to any moves towards it, whether they are small increments or large changes. To support this, questions are asked about the client's story, strengths, and resources, and about exceptions to the problem. Solution-focused therapists believe that change is consistent. By helping people identify the things that they wish to have changed in their life, and also to attend to those things that are currently happening that they wish to continue have happen. Solution-focused brief therapists help their clients to construct a concrete vision of a preferred future for themselves. The therapist then helps the client to identify times in their current life that are closer to the future and examines what is different on those occasions. By bringing these small successes to their awareness and helping them to repeat these successful things that they have done, the problem is not as severe or as insurmountable as what the individual may have identified at once. Solution-focused work can be seen as a way of working that focuses exclusively on predominantly two things: supporting people to explore their preferred futures, exploring when, where, and whom, and how pieces of that preferred future might already be happening and where they can go with those. While this is often done using a social constructionist perspective, the approach is practical and can be achieved with no specific therapeutical framework beyond the initiation the intention to keep as close as possible to these two things. The people that are noted for this would be Milton Erickson, Jay Haley, William Medinas, and Tom Anderson, and Michael White. Some of the concepts that we use when we're talking about solution-focused therapy are the miracle question. So asking literally, suppose you went to sleep and a miracle happened and you woke up and the problem was solved. What would be different? What would that look like? Looking very much at the notion problem talk into solution talk. So looking at where the problem is, and then looking at those things that the individual can identify as the strengths within their own system to take and have some type of solution or revolution to the problem. Solution-focused therapy is a direct descendant of the MRI approach, yet it turns to the problem-centered focus on it in looking specifically at the problem, not where did the problem come from. Other concepts within this therapy are really assuming that the client does want to change. Also, validating that there's not necessarily one correct way to live one's life, that here again, very client-centered, and that people already have the skills. They already know what skills that are there. They already have the ability to change. It's just kind of helping them sort out that ability to change. Also, another portion of this that is real similar to MI for me when I look at it is the scaling questions that solution-focused therapy supports, and that is asking on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do they want to change, or where are they in the change process? And that can be done simply by saying, on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, how important is it for you to make this change? And that can give you a wealth of information to use reflecting back to the patient or to the client about the change process. Also asking on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident is the individual? And this is where many of the solutions that the individual has already used can take and come out and come into play, because they can say, well, I'm maybe at a 5, and you can ask the individual, well, why are you at a 5 as far as your ability, and not a 1 or a 2? And they say, well, I've maybe had some luck in the past, or I've made progress in the past, or we're talking about sobriety, I've maybe had some periods of time where I was able to avoid problematic substance use, and then exploring that with the individual. Hence, they're coming up with their own solutions which are relative to their life and to their lifestyle and with their family and their family experience. Moving on to the narrative perspective, this is related to Michael White. He was one of the people that was very key in the development of the narrative perspective. Some of the concepts that are very important to look at here is the personal narrative and social construction. Okay, so things that are socially constructed. To understand social construction, it's important to look at sociology and the way that the sociology, I think, defines things that are socially constructed, which would basically mean that things have a meaning because we've attached that meaning to them. One of the things when I teach sociology that I use as a good representation for social construction is money, because money only has a value because we give that piece of paper that value. It's a social construct. It's socially constructed. So you're looking at the personal individual narrative in this process, and you're also looking at how things are constructed around that narrative, maybe from other family members, or how that is developed into the story that is understood by the different members of the family or of the individual. The narrative approach is built around two organizing metaphors, personal narrative and social construction. When memory speaks, it tells a narrative truth, which comes to have more influence than historical truth. The facts presented to the therapist are partially historical truth and partially constructed. The constructions that make up the shared reality of a family represent mutual understandings and shared prejudices, some of which are useful, some of which are not. So it's kind of looking at there's things that are specific as far as this is what happened, okay? Where this is important is Johnny got in trouble at school for smoking marijuana. Okay, that is a historical truth. The other things that could be constructed around that are how the family views that, what the family's insight is into that, and the way that then the family deals with that. And so it looks at things a little bit differently than some of the other therapeutic models do. So looking at 3 different stages, so the problem narrative stage, so looking at what is that? Have little Johnny explain his story. Have other family members explain their story. Finding exceptions to actually finding exceptions to the construct, and then recruitment of support within the final process. So narrative therapists seek to break the grip of unhelpful stories by externalizing problems. By challenging pessimistic visions of events, therapists make room for flexibility and hope. Uncovering unique outcomes provides an opening through which new and more optimistic stories can be envisioned through the family. Finally, clients are encouraged to create audiences of support to witness and promote their progress and restoring their lives along preferred lines. So externalizing the problem, so looking at the problem as its own entity, so looking at removing the problem from the individual. So really externalizing problems, externalizing little Johnny's issue, okay? So not looking at it as, not labeling little Johnny is bad because he smoked marijuana. So let's remove that from little Johnny and look at little Johnny as a whole, and looking at how those outcomes can be changed by having support within the family and support within the structure as a whole. The family disease perspective looks basically at issues within the family that could be changed through medication, support groups, and education, rather than to explore the network of relationships in which the problems were embedded. So really looking at a medical model and taking that type of approach to dealing with the family problems. I always say when I think about that is the family disease perspective is many times we get into the discussion of is substance, are substance use disorders, is that a disease, is that a brain disease? And one thing I certainly know, that when you stand back and look at the issue itself, it presents itself as a disease in the way that it progresses. I think when you look at family issues within the family, they're going to do the same thing. I think they're going to progress in a way that is very contagious to the family, and it is also very detrimental. I can't, having issues talking again. Detrimental. You know what I'm saying. Very harmful to the family, and hindering the family progression and process in general. Multi-systemic and multi-dimensional perspectives resulted out of research with difficult adolescents. It's a combination of techniques. I like to go back and look at some of the other models that we talked about and really look at putting together genograms and systems models when doing this, and really looking at how those family structures are assembled and the relationships within the family. I think it's extremely important to understand, especially with adolescents, where the problems are and how they've related to the other family members, and where the issues lie within the family and the supports within the structure as a whole. So moving on to stages of family change. First of all, we have, when working with individuals, working with the family and applying this to substance use disorders, obviously there's that attainment of sobriety for the individual or maybe individuals within a family that you're working with. So looking at how does that affect the family as a whole, how does that affect the dynamic? As we talked about a little bit earlier, families change, roles change. Sometimes these things shift in unsuspected manners and patterns. Just because somebody reaches sobriety and gains sobriety does not necessarily mean that it's going to solve all the problems within the family. Quite frankly, it may have the opposite effect, because many times individuals think that, well, because Jim has this ongoing problem with alcohol use, that once Jim gets sober, the family is going to be a normal, quote, family now, and we're not going to have that problem anymore. And while the sobriety itself is a good thing, some of the adjustments within the family structure may not always be positive. And can be very, very unexpected. The family will adjust many times, and I've seen, working with families, I've seen many times where families have actually separated after the individual became sober, as a response to other behaviors that took place or maybe change that did not occur. So there's that adjustment to sobriety and the maintenance of long-term change that has to occur within the family. And it's very crucial how the family adjusts at that time to the stability of the family and the long-term actually prognosis of the family and the family change process. This leads to a little bit of a discussion about codependency, and I often look at this and discuss this with other colleagues and actually within classes as well. So what is really what is codependency? And many times we look at it and we define it as the individual's or the codependence dependency on the individual that is having the issue. So it's their dependency on that person and that person's problems, and the way that that makes them dependent on that behavior system that the individual with the problematic behavior is presenting. And as it says on this slide, control others as they believe they are incapable of taking care of themselves. So it continues to support and many times foster the unacceptable behavior, or the behavior identified as the behavior of change. And people become quite ill, and they struggle with those issues within that person as much as the person with the substance use disorder is struggling themselves. And you see this within substance use, mental health, and co-occurring disorders as well, that people become codependent within these problems and within these issues. It's very important, I think, if you're doing family therapy with someone or with a couple or with a family, to identify the codependence and identify that list of behaviors and how that's affecting the family and the family system and the codependent themselves. And just kind of codependency in conclusion, I think that the progression of codependency is much like the progression of the substance use disorder itself. The codependent many times becomes more affected and more affected by the individual's problematic behavior, obviously, as it progresses, and you can stand back and just watch the change in the family and the way that the family adapts to the problems that the individual that is the one with the substance use disorder is projecting. So some of the different structures that we look at, Our client lives with partner and minor children. So many times children will internalize this system, or these deficits within the system, and believe that the abuse is their fault, or that the problem is their fault. Many times children will feel responsible for what the parent is doing and for the substance use disorder, and it really causes many problems within the family and within the family structure when this is going on, as well as you can see the deficits within the child's learning, or possibly school activities as well. It's a way that it's reflected, and many times the family will draw themselves in and become quite static when this is going on, and the family will become a very closed system, and it will be represented in the children's behavior, whether it be with peers, friends, and within school. Client lives with parents, or excuse me, client lives with partner and minor child. Increased risk for mood and anxiety disorders. Increased rates of divorce, violence, and the need for control in relationships. And you see this lots of times within domestic violence issues, where people are becoming violent and try to control relationships, or control their partner within the relationship. And many times that power and control is used as a way, well, not only to manipulate the partner and children, but it also sustains the substance use disorder or the mental health issue that the client is faced with themselves. Some children actually do become quite resilient to this, and very adaptable. Well, as the same thing when I was saying just a few moments ago, you can see a child many times retreat. At the same time, children are quite resilient and can adapt amazingly well to some of these situations. Adolescent that lives with family origin. These are some of the issues that we see that have developed within those situations. So violent behavior, delinquency, psychiatric disorders, risky sexual behavior, impulsivity, neurological impairment, and development impairment. Effective substance use and family structures. So client lives with partner, and minor children. Client is part of a blended family, or older client with adult children, or adolescent client and family of origin. So counselor involvement. There's minimal emphasis on family. The service provider deals with the family only as required by practical necessity or legal regulation, and does not adapt educational activities to a particular needs of the parent or family. So just, you know, it's minimal involvement. The information and advice, so the individual will just provide information and possibly content advice about families, parenting, and child development. So it's a little bit more involved, and it is more as an advisor or as a helper in developing skills and things of that nature. Feelings and support. So the base is to understand individual and family reactions to stress and the emotional aspects of the group process. Eliciting expressions of feelings and concerns, empathetic listening, normalizing feelings and reactions, creating an open and supportive environment for clients, protecting a parent from too much self-disclosure in a group, engaging parents in collaboration and problem-solving discussions, and tailoring recommendations to unique needs, concerns, and feelings to the parent and family. And then brief focused intervention. awareness of one's own participation in systems, including one's own family system, the system of the parents, and larger community systems. So what you might do would be ask a series of questions to elicit a detailed picture of the family dynamics of a parent's problem, developing a hypothesis about family system dynamics involved in the problem, and working with the parent for a short period of time to change a family interaction pattern beyond one-to-one parent and or child relationships. The 7 C's. I'm briefly going to cover these. These are just important things to know about and be aware of. So first of all, character features. Characteristics of a person that tend to be persistent and play a major role in defining that person. So basic character features. Cultural and ethnic factors. Variables from the context in which individuals and couples exist, surrounding cultural focuses that shape relationships. So very important. It's very important to be aware of cultural and ethnic issues when dealing with families, and not to negate that importance at any time. Contract features. So it's a set of implicit or explicit expectations that partners have concerning how they will define the relationship and relate with each other. So how do they take and view that, or how does that relationship look in the way that they communicate and in the way that they have expectations built upon that relationship? Explicit, attainable, mutually agreed upon, and beneficial to both partners. Commitment. So what type of commitment is in place? Stability, quality, how stable is that commitment? What's the quality of that relationship? I always many times look at when you talk about this, the commitment, what is the quality of the relationship and the relationship across time? And caring. So how caring, how empathetic and how and caring is the individual and are the individuals within the relationship. Is this expressed through, what types of affection and sexual intimacy are taking place? Mutually pleasing activities. So what do they do? What do they do for fun? How do they enjoy each other? What do they do for the friendship and the quality time together? How is this expressed? Positive daily communication in relationship is often something to promote within a relationship, especially if there's not a lot of positive communication taking place. It's one of the things that can be the focus of family therapy and couples therapy. And as it says, negative communications are characterized by expression of negative feelings, anger, shame, hurt, things of that. Thus, the message is not heard by the listener many times. And conflict resolution. So how do we resolve this conflict? So these are just some things to do or to promote in positive conflict resolution. So stop, slow down, really look at the problem. So you have to see the problem to be able to identify it. Outline options. So what can we do? And look at consequences of the options. So you're looking at the issue. You're defining some type of a change. You're outlining those options, and you're looking at consequences of those options, and vote, and then evaluate. What did this do? So, make a decision, not just a unilateral decision on what's going to happen, but some type of a decision in the process to really look at change. So here's a summary. So just really looking at individuals and the way that they work together and to promote healthy communication within the family structure. So cultural considerations. Obviously, this is extremely important, and it is something that many times within the clinician takes extra study, extra training, and I always recommend if you're working with a group that you're not real familiar with, talk if you can't maybe go to a specific training on that group, talk to other clinicians that might have. And even just talk to the client, talk to the individual themselves in an open empathetic manner and ask them, about specific things that are maybe specific to their ethnic or cultural background. And most importantly, listen when doing that. So, what is the definition of family origin? So it's the birth of biological family of any system instrumental or significant in the client's early development. Okay, so if that's family of origin, cultural consideration, and what is cultural competency? So families are not always that birth origin, especially as a person grows older. They can be self-defined. Okay. So really looking at cultural competency, and there's always this discussion of what is cultural competency, and some people define it simply as being culturally competent to work with other cultures besides my own. I think what is important and to really look at here is that everybody has some type of a predetermined notion about people or groups of people, and all you have to do is think about your own behavior when you see somebody walking towards you on the street, and the way that you interpret them and the way that your brain responds. And we know that just because of the way that we're programmed and the way that we're enculturated, we're going to have certain predetermined notions about groups of people that are just going to be there. And I think it's important to understand and to face those and to say, hey, yeah, I probably have that. So what can I do to bridge that gap between what maybe I have been, enculturated or socialized to believe, and what effect is there in reality, and in how these groups respond. So I think it is extremely important to look at that and address it. Some of the different groups that we look at here are African Americans, Hispanics, Latinos, American Indians, or the Native American population, and sexually diverse groups. Working with the African American population, it says, despite the unique nature of African American families when they experience substance use, abuse, and addiction, most of the process is not culturally specific. Like all families, they experience denial, anger, enabling of the chemically dependent member, feelings of loss and of family integrity, structure, values, trust, and financial stability. The other thing I like to really point out here, as I will on the next slide as well, this is a large group of people when you start talking about African American families. I mean, where did the family generate from? Is this a family that has had multiple generations in our country, or is this family a family that may have recently came to this country or immigrated to this country? When you look at the groups of people that we put this label on, it's quite wide. So it's really important to be aware of the diversities within this population. It's very important to be aware of that. And again, maybe how many generations that the family has been in this country. The Hispanic Latino family value system is very strong within the families. Working with this group of people can be quite difficult many times because you might not have that open welcomeness from the individual coming into your office, or even if the family comes into your office. So the families are very close-knit, very tight. There's a real responsibility within the culture to be very supportive and equally share within many of the problems within the family or benefits within the family unit. And from an early age, the importance of honor and good manners and respect to authority and the elders is instilled, and is also quite important many times within agencies to have someone who speaks Spanish in the agency to be able to communicate, especially depending on where you're located and where you're working. As it says, families often gather together to celebrate holidays, birthdays, baptisms, first communions, graduations, weddings, and so forth. Again, this is a really wide population. I mean, obviously, we have a lot of people that have immigrated from Mexico in our country, but from all over many parts of the globe, quite frankly, people can be labeled within this population. So it's really important to know the background, to sit back. And the other thing I'd like to say is not to pressure individuals when you're having communication within the family, but to be very open and just listen and use your good communication skills as a therapist. Moving on to the Native American. Here within the Midwest and Upper Midwest, some of the tribes that we have here are the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota tribes, and these are some of their traditions that we're going to talk about here just briefly. I think it's important to understand when talking about Native American population that they value the structure of the family different than what we do. It's extremely important to understand that. I have been real recently, am currently working with a gentleman who's part of the Sioux Fox tribe here, not too far from Iowa City, which is where we're located here. He's a member of that tribe, and he has been having ongoing substance use issues for quite some time. And we've been working with him and his family. But when working with him, it's valuable to know that there are things there within the tribe that are that he's eligible to take part in. There are specific treatment facilities for Native American clients and patients. I highly recommend being resourceful when working with Native Americans, and usually you can do a treatment locator through SAMHSA and find out if there's a treatment facility near where the tribal community may be, or just calling the tribal council or some type of an elder within the council that may be able to be identified with you're working with your patient. The structure of the family here again is quite different, and the importance that individuals place on each other within that family. You may just, when we look at family as individuals with European descent, we don't have that same focus. I mean, somebody might be married to our let's say we have a family like a brother, your sister-in-law, and then your sister-in-law's relatives. Well, we're going to view those probably quite differently than what somebody from the Native American population is. They're going to see those people as being just as important as what we may see somebody closer in that genetic or in the genogram. So when you're doing genograms of Native Americans, those people that are further out on that genealogy are going to be somewhere different structurally, the way that they are perceiving them than maybe what our background of European descent is going to tell us where they maybe should be. This is the 7 values of the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota tribe, and I think here again, looking at this, very holistic. This is such a holistic concept, which is, and what I've also found out when talking to several of the different programs that provide services to the Native American population, they have a real focus on holistic concepts. 564 recognized tribes in 2009, as many as 300 others not federally recognized. These are the statistics with the population, and with 1 in 8 or 13% of the population having some type of a substance use disorder. So that is a little bit higher than the regular population. Substance use, alcohol use is a tremendous issue on Indian reservations with the Native American population. I have a series of slides here. I'm not going to cover all of these in depth, but I did include these. They come from the National Survey on Substance Abuse Treatment Services report from July 9th, 2009, and it's just some interesting stuff to look at as far as where individuals within the Native American population are receiving services, and also what type of services are available. And so these will be provided in the handout that you get on the PowerPoints. This is one as I find particularly interesting. This is languages used to provide services. So ones that are language sensitive. Types of counseling, so individual, group, family, or marital counseling. Another topic within the native population is the concept of two-spirit, which is persons with both male and female spirits, which would translate into LGBT for a lot of us, but it's seen differently within the Native American population, which individuals within this population were not necessarily discriminated against, and were actually seen as persons possibly having a higher status or a higher level of spirit within the Native American population, until the acculturation process with many tribes, where the homophobic views took place, and then became part of the culturalization process within younger members of the tribe. Okay, moving on to the LGBT community. So many times LGBT members have replacement families or networks. Not only that family of origin many times will disappear within the LGBT families, but will become very much defined by acceptance of other individuals, either within the family or within the community in general. There is a provider's manual put out for this, and I recommend that you look at this manual and go to the SAMHSA website and order it if you don't have a copy of it. Some of the information on the LGBT community, it was same-sex attraction and behavior was considered a mental disorder, and finally in 1973 it was removed from the American Psychiatric Association from the DSM. The terminology, so if you look at the different groups, this is a listing of the different groups that are out there being identified today: lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, queer, intersex, two-spirit, Native American population, and allies. So these are some of the different categories and descriptors. And this can get very confusing, and with so many more sexual identities than what people ever thought are out there when you look at the different identities. And one to look at that I always use, so many times you'll find someone that presents as a male, would like to have sexual reassignment to a female to have sex with females, okay? So people would think, well, that doesn't make sense, but that's its own identity, and it's very real, and I have worked actually with quite a few people with that gender identity. So it's just one to think about as an awareness. The Kinsey scale is one of the tools for many years. It's been used as a go-to for identifying homosexuality or heterosexuality as a 0 to 6 type of a scale. The CAST model, or the coming out model, is a 7-stage process. It's been adapted from several other models, but to just talk about this briefly, because I know we're running out of time, I just would like to cover part of this. So confusion, so it occurs when a person begins to realize that there may be something different going on, that, hey, maybe I am gay. Okay, so the exploration increases, anxiety, confusion, denial. It can be a really difficult process for a lot of people to go through. Stage 2 occurs when a person accepts the possibility that he or she may be gay or lesbian. So it's really coming to that, okay, yeah, I am. So I kind of look at this really as almost like the stages of change. So this would be the contemplation stage, really, where I really look at this. Tolerance occurs when a person comes to accept the probability that he or she is an LGBT person, and many times becomes quite irritated and angry with society in general because of the ways that they have felt against themselves or about themselves in a very negative manner for very many years possibly. And it can be so obvious to many people, even that the individual may be gay or lesbian, and the person themselves hadn't even internalized it, and once this process happens, they become quite upset. Acceptance is just a continuation of this process, so it's where the individual fully accepts themselves. And then hostility can develop towards the straight culture. So that it's that ongoing, like it's almost like that peak of the rage, the peak of the sadness, the peak of the hostility. So really, you know, having those feelings towards society in general, and just the acculturation process that we've all gone through. And then there's the pride stage, where the individual really starts to immerse themselves into the culture. They're excited about it. They become very much more positive, and rejecting the norm of straight culture in general. The synthesis process, a fully internalized and integrated LGBT identity, and expresses him or herself as a whole with interacting with everyone across all environments. So the defenses have gone down. As it talks about being maintenance. So a lot of, you know, a lot of positive emotion, positive things happening within the individual. I'm probably going to stop right there because I want to leave time for some questions. There are a few more slides on here, but if you get these slides and you go through them and you have any questions about any of the content, you can always feel free to take and contact me at my email address, which I believe you'll be provided with as well. So I'll turn it over at this time.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Haycraft. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us today. And yeah, at this time, if you have questions, please type them into the question chat box, and I will read them out so Mr. Haycraft can respond. We do have a question already, so this question is, in reference to LGBT, what do you recommend in working with Native American adolescents in foster care or juvenile custody of those families, especially LGBT step-parents?
So LGBT step-parents within the Native American community, is that what?
Yeah, so working with Native American adolescents who are in foster care or juvenile custody, who maybe have LGBT step-parents.
Okay. I would recommend, first of all, keeping a very open stance working with them, and what I mean by that is listen a lot to what they're saying, being able to hear what the problems are that they're having because of that relationship, or because of the issues in the surrounding culture. Obviously, some cultures, as well as some ethnic groups, are a little bit more acceptive or receptive of the LGBT community, and others are not. I think also looking at the research that's out there as far as having somebody from the LGBT community as a parent or within a parental relationship is going to show that it's more the quality of the relationship. So I would really build on the strengths of that relationship and the quality of that relationship, because most of that research suggests that that is what is the predictor on the outcome. It's not whether the parents are of the LGBT community or not. And I would really just focus on that. I would focus on the strengths of the family, and if there are any negatives that are presenting themselves, I would look at those and look if those are coming from within the family or if they're coming from externally from the family, and then address those accordingly and appropriately. I hope that was some help.
Good. So yeah, if others have questions, we don't have any others at the moment. But if you have any other questions, please submit them at this time.
Can I make a comment? Is also following up with that. If it's somebody that lives on a reservation, there are some reservations, and because I don't have a list of what every reservation has for a resource, but there are adolescent resource centers in most reservations that I have found. And so it would be helpful to look within those populations and within those reservations and see if there is a way that adolescent or that child could maybe be hooked up with those services for support within the community itself.
Great. And we've no other questions at this time. So if you do have a question, please submit it, as we are about to run out of our time here. We'll just take a couple more minutes for questions, and then we will give some closing information. All right. Well, since we don't have any additional questions, I will go on, and we will be sure to share Mr. Haycraft's email address in our email that we send out, so that if you do have additional questions that we weren't able to address today, you can contact him at the time. So again, I'd like to thank Mr. Haycraft for sharing his expertise with us, and please watch for our email with handouts for this webinar. Attachments will include the CEU request form, PowerPoint handout, and a link to our customer satisfaction survey. We appreciate your decision to complete our survey, as completion of these surveys allows us to show SAMHSA and the number of people served by our webinar. To participate in the GIPRA evaluation, follow the link in the email. We hope you'll be able to join us for the next webinar in this series, Client, Family, and Community Education, with presenter Robert Foley on Wednesday, December 18th. We hope you'll also be able to join us for our next webinar in our American Indian and Alaska Native Behavioral Health webinar series on December 2nd, when Becky Cussing will present on techniques used in combating prescription drug abuse from the Keweenaw Bay Indian community. Thank you for your time participating in the session today. We hope you've enjoyed the session and look forward to hearing your feedback.